I started out in media, both in front of the camera as well as behind the camera, while I was also working on the digital strategy to get the word out there about the shows that we were creating on TV and utilizing online as a platform for experimentation. Hi, I'm Juliette Powell. I'm an author, an integrated media specialist, and I'm an entrepreneur. I founded the Gathering think tank, and you can reach out to me anytime at juliettepowell.com. So I've had the pleasure with consulting with a number of different large companies through the Gathering think tank, from Nokia to Research in Motion, NASA and Cirque du Soleil. And one of the things that I noticed is that they know how to play on an international playing field, but they don't necessarily know how to incorporate some of the things that they believe in and be able to reflect it outwardly. And so one of the key components of what I do is aligning what individuals that are shaping companies believe in and aligning that with what they're actually doing both internally as well as externally. So I'm a global strategist with a very, very narrow focus on media. But when we talk about media, it's television, the internet, mobile, as well as radio. The biggest challenge, from what I understand of digital media right now, is the digital literacy component. It's understanding how to use those tools, not just to have fun, but to actually do business and to do so authentically. For people who aren't necessarily used to communicating using social technology, it's very important for them to know that it's not about wasting time. It's not about just playing. It's not just about throwing snowballs on Facebook or adding applications for games. Working with larger scale organizations, oftentimes the person that approaches me already understands. They get it. They understand the power of social networking. They understand the power of social networking within their own organization to get the word out. Also understand oftentimes how important it is to have transparency within the organization, and the best way to do that is by creating a social network that employees can work in that is not public, but that again empowers all of the employees to be able to have their say. So they come to me and they say, okay, great, just read your book, please help us devise this global strategy. And I do. And then they come back to me and say, well, our lawyers got involved, and we've got 99% of our employees that aren't digitally literate, so we want to assign it to our marketing team. And so then I go meet with the marketing team. And the marketing team says, well, I also want to bring in the sales team, which is fair. And so we all have a conversation together, but something weird happens. One minute I'm talking to people, and the next minute I'm talking to marketing and sales executives. Because it's not a culture of digital literacy, the human being takes a back seat to the corporate cog. I really feel like it's much easier for smaller companies, for startup companies, to be fully authentic. They didn't have their feet in the traditional world to start with. Therefore, they're willing to start fresh. They're starting in a difficult economy. They're willing to test out just about anything to make it work, because they're in a position where if they don't, they might just lose everything, if they haven't already. Larger companies most times feel like, well, we're already number one in our industry or number two. Why should we do anything differently? We've already showed year after year, even in downturn, that we can succeed. So why should we change the way that we've been doing things? So there was a wonderful study that came out a couple of months ago, and it's called a social engagement study. Starbucks was the #1 company to come out of this social engagement study, which means that they had the highest usage of distribution channels for their messaging, and they had the highest net revenues at the end of the year vis-a-vis what they spent. What's really interesting to me about Starbucks is that they beat out so many technology companies. They beat out the Dells, they beat out the Blackberries, they beat out all of these companies that make the technology that enables us to reach out beyond our normal means to be able to amplify our messages through digital technology. Why? Because it's not about the technology. It's about the people. It's about the authenticity of the message. There's a competitive advantage of doing things quickly and empowering those that you might view as your customers or clients, but are in fact part of your process. They're part of what you do. You're supposed to be making products and services for people who want them, who need them. But how do you know what they want and what they need if you're not in the forums in which they actually discuss it? They didn't try to go out and make a Facebook page. They started listening to what people were already doing with their brand, which means that they spent several months just monitoring what's going on. When people talk about Starbucks, how are they talking about Starbucks? Why are they talking about Starbucks? What's the tone? What's the message? What do they care about? Well, what they found out is that a lot of people chat about Starbucks because they think that the facilities are clean. In fact, very little of the fodder about Starbucks is about how great their coffee is. But it didn't matter, because Starbucks understood that the more people talked about them in a positive light, no matter what they were saying, the better it was. Starbucks turned to them and said, you know what? We don't want to change anything about what you're doing, but we do want to help you. Because essentially we're talking about a bunch of kids, right, that are fans of Starbucks. That's where they meet their friends. That's where they play video games. That's where they hang out. So we don't want to change the tone. We don't want to slap logos. We don't want to give you discount coupons unless you want them. But what can we do to help? Eventually the kids said, you know what? It's really tough managing 200,000 people and doing so while going to school and doing all the other things that we need to do. So we'd love to get a little bit more help in terms of being responsive to all of these fans. You know, it's really interesting when I think about how companies hire employees. I'm sure that they look at their resumes and they sit down with them and they wonder, are you going to be able to fit within our corporate culture and whatnot? But I wonder how many companies actually sit down and start thinking about that particular employee's digital literacy, their ability to utilize connected technology to get their message out there. There's a study that demonstrates that the more an employee has that capability, the more of an asset that that employee is to the company. But that only happens if the company embraces that digital literacy. So if you're one of my star employees, but I've already put in a firewall saying you're not allowed to use Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, search the web for whatever it is that you feel is pertinent during work, and that if you do so outside of work, you will get X, Y, and Z penalties, then there's a whole component to that employee that you're not able to maximize it. So Starbucks, in 2 months, went from 200,000 fans to 3.5 million fans on a Facebook page that they didn't even start in the first place. And the part that I didn't mention before is, as big as Starbucks is, they only had 6 people. They had 6 people working social media for Starbucks. And this was beyond their actual jobs. These 6 people were doing it because they love it, because it's natural to them, because they truly could be authentic. And unless you're going to be that, don't even go there.